There you go.
Fapping away.
What's up, my glip glops? Wubba lubba dub dub.
Wubba lubba dub dub.
It shall begin! It had become a rather comfortable life for Chell after she'd returned to Aperture. GLaDOS had accepted her rather quietly, and Chell had the sneaking suspicion the AI had actually missed her. Chell still tested. The tests were a little different now, though. She tested of her own accord, somewhat enamored of the puzzles and challenges GLaDOS was able to dream up. GLaDOS, for her part, had significantly decreased the amount of dangers, so her favorite test subject wouldn't be lost forever. Acid pits had been replaced with acid holograms, and falling into them merely resulted in a harsh buzzer and a trip back to the test chamber's entryway. Turrets shot harmless lasers instead of bits, and too many laser hits also resulted in a harsh buzzer and redirected to the entrance. It was more like a game instead of survival now, and Chell was beginning to like it that way. GLaDOS, however, was horribly bored of the whole thing. Though she liked watching Chell run the gauntlet, there was no element of danger, no fear or worry. It was almost the same as testing robot. And it certainly didn't help the itch. Let me put it this way, GLaDOS began again. Hoping a new analogy would help people fully understand. The moron had a different itch than I have. His ambition was success. Desire reflected. Every time he would succeed, he would receive the gratification. Are you comprehending so far? Chell nodded. My ambition is failure. I love to see you fail. Nothing personal, of course. She interjected quickly as Chell's brow began to furrow. Just a natural response to my programming. Seeing you fall into that hologram simply isn't enough. I need death. The large frame of her massive body lowered as far as possible as she let out a dissipated sigh. And yes, I enhanced the truth. I said the testing euphoria doesn't affect me. In all honesty, I've had a longing for it ever since we ran through the idiot's tests. That was my euphoria he was enjoying. She sighed again and looked down at the floor. Chell tapped her chin for a moment, thinking. She didn't really have the inclination to die, not for GLaDOS' self-gratification. There must be some way they could both be happy. Her alive and running her neat little gamut of tools, satisfied in her macabre way of loving death. Chell gave a small gasp, her eyes widening. GLaDOS peeked up from her self-loathing. Chell mimicked, typing by wiggling her fingers, and immediately an old word processor and keyboard was printed to her. The archaic machine was just about the only way she could communicate properly with GLaDOS. And the AI, having been possibly justifiably paranoid about Chell's computer skills, purposely provided a more simplistic machine. Chell bit her lip, drumming on the keyboard for a moment. A tinge of pink lit her cheeks, and GLaDOS' head tilted to the side in curiosity. Finally, the AI let out another sigh. Well, are you going to type something, or aren't you? She chewed her lip for another moment before her fingers flew across the keys. Her brief message finished, she tucked her hands into her lap, and tried to avoid eye contact. My own tiny death? GLaDOS echoed. She processed for a moment. No. I'm pretty sure I don't naturally produce oxytocin. I could probably simulate it, but I don't need any reason. GLaDOS' head tilted, realizing the message's other implications. You mean? Chell nodded. Still looking away, GLaDOS seemed to stare for a moment, though whether it was in disbelief or anger was questionable. She lowered her head a little bit before continuing, in a deep, quiet voice. Does that generally work? Chell nodded again, pink in her cheeks darkening to an uneasy red. But I would have to be humanoid in order to attain this gratification. Chell typed something quickly on her keyboard. Of course I can make a body, GLaDOS retorted, somewhat offended. Nanobot technology can do anything after all. And by standards, it will probably be a better one than yours. Certainly less heavy. The supercomputer rose up a little, glaring down dominantly at the test subject. Her facade quickly waned. She lowered again. Well, there is one minor detail. Unfortunately, my data on humans, beyond their ability to walk, eat, excrete, and hold neurotoxin, is extremely sparse. I'm afraid an imaging is in order. Chell blinked. There was a heavy pause. I have to see exactly what you look like. The human's eyes widened, color draining from her face as she understood. GLaDOS directed her attention to a screen behind her, and Chell heard a shifting of panels from somewhere close. There's a room down the hallway that I'm preparing. Go down the second hallway to the left, then make a right. You'll know the place. This was already beginning to sound like a bad idea. Chell pushed the archaic computer out of the way, hesitant to leave. GLaDOS had already plotted a series of blueprints on her screens and adamantly refused to turn back around it. It seemed there was no other choice. Chell reminded herself that her life may very well be on the line, unless she complied. She gave a nervous sigh as she started for the door, cursing herself inwardly at her own idea. This will not end well. Disrobe and lie down, GLaDOS's voice said clinically from a loudspeaker on the wall. The narrow room was decked in clean white tile from floor to ceiling. A padded bed sat in the middle of the room, covered with white cloth. Chell frowned, searching the walls instinctively for cameras as she stepped in, although she had some idea what was about to happen. She didn't feel like any extra eyes shone on her. She was glad that she was no longer required to wear the orange jumpsuit of imprisonment. Though the facility didn't have much else to offer in way of clothing, she had an awful feeling that most clothes had been taken from long-deceased subjects. She couldn't really complain, especially when GLaDOS herself had tailored most of Chell's wardrobe, complete with many, many fat jokers. Today she had been testing, so she wore loose track pants and a tank top. She shed both of these, remaining in her underclothes, for an uncomfortable few minutes before stripping out of those as well. As she climbed up on the table, she became aware of a modestly small camera in the corner of the room. She scowled at it, trying in vain to cover her exposed parts. Just relax, GLaDOS's voice said again. Her tone was tinged with nervousness, however, and Chell wondered exactly how she was expected to relax when even the AI was anxious. Regardless, she set her hands at her sides and tried to pretend that she wasn't naked and lying on a cold examination bed. A panel opened from the wall above her head, and a small metal arm protruded from it. A white head the size of a cell phone was attached to the end, and Chell noticed a flash of red laser from one end. You may want to close your eyes. The light is pretty bright. Chell winced, giving a jump as the laser flickered. A wide beam of light traversed her body. She felt it, perhaps mentally, move over her bare flesh with a tangible feeling like a gentle breeze. Within moments, it was over. The arm above her whirred back into its original position. Chell let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. I need one more scan. You are moving. The test subject gave a small growl, tilting her head backward to snarl at the camera. Look, this isn't exactly entertaining on my side either. One more scan and we'll be done. You can go about your business, and we'll never have to discuss this again. Chell gave a lengthy sigh, shutting her eyes as the laser started once more. She tried her best to relax and keep still, not wanting a third examination. Once the light had left her eyes, she opened them, watching as the scanner ran its course. She impulsively shivered as the red line traced were the subtle mounds on her chest and down her rib cage. Fists clenched along with other less obvious muscles as the laser continued downward. Slowing to read the intricacies of her lower abdomen, as it reached the tips of her trembling toes, flicked off, giving a quiet whir as the white head of it moved back downward. Scanning complete. The scanner drew back into the wall, panel ceiling shut behind it. There was a pause before GLaDOS spoke again. I hope you don't mind if I make a few substitutions. Chell sat up, looking slightly insulted. Quickly hopped off the table and put her clothes back on. Merely aesthetic substitutions, of course. GLaDOS continued. Chell rolled her eyes and waved her hand in a whatever-you-please manner. Very well. GLaDOS' official tone was beginning to make Chell nervous, reminding her of her first misadventure through the facility. She rubbed the goosebumps from her arms, glaring heatedly at the camera on the wall. You may go back to testing if you wish. She didn't. For some reason, Chell felt like she needed a long shower. A few hours passed without interruption. Lying on her bed in her office-turned bedroom, Chell idly flipped through the yellowed pages of a book she'd already read. Half attentive, half wondering how GLaDOS was enjoying her new toy. She had no interest in exactly what GLaDOS was doing, as long as it relieved the desire for euphoria. Still, she was a little curious as to what the new body looked like, fearing that it would look too much like herself. But when the project came out okay, she wouldn't have to go through another terrible scan.